Hi and welcome to this edition of the CNBC Africa special. My guest today is the chairman and co-founder of CNBC Africa. He's an entrepreneur, he's been in the TV business for the last 25 years, and he's set up news channels across 3 continents. I'm talking about Zafar Siddiqi, the media investor, and now the author of the new book, TV News 3.0. It was launched last month. And if ever you want to start a TV news channel and want to change the world at the same time, this is the book that you'd want to read. Zafar, thank you so much for joining us today. My first question to you, most welcome. My first question to you is, you've been an accountant, you're an accountant by profession, you've been with KPMG for the last, you were with KPMG for 16 years, and then the TV industry. What attracted you to this medium?
Well, very simply put, I was watching TV one night, and in those days you had Star TV from Hong Kong. Yes. You had no private TV stations in Asia, Middle East or in Africa, all state controlled. But anyway, what drove me towards it is what I saw when I switched on the TV, that there was a program on entertainment this week. Yes. on India, on Star TV. Then there was business this week on Star TV. I said, why shouldn't I do something? Because business, I felt comfortable. And hence the next day, and I've written so in my book as to how it all started off. And the next day I went to a friend of mine who then helped me in my initial journey, and I established a TV production company, which then went on to produce a weekly program on business.
And then you went on to establish TV channels in the Middle East across 18 countries, Pakistan, Africa, across 39 countries. And you've mentioned in your book that you have a great passion for TV broadcast, the broadcast medium, and also for newsroom journalism. Can you tell us why you picked this title for the book, TV News 3.0?
Oh, very simply put, look, the World Economic Forum has the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is based on this technology burst that we have seen over the past 10, 15 years. Television in itself, it started off with this little black box, which was invented, which some people said, oh, people will get fed up of watching this. And it was TV by appointment. The family sat together, watched the 6 o'clock news or the 9 o'clock news, and then it grew from there. That was the start of, I would call, TV 1.0, okay? Yes. Then something happened in the 80s. Yeah. CNN, Ted Turner launched CNN. When he launched CNN, it was either NBC or ABC chairman who referred to, or it was referred to as chicken noodle news.
Oh, yes. Okay. I do remember that.
And people said, who would want to watch 24 hours a day? They can't keep up. Forget about this. Yes. This is just a fad that will go away. But when CNN captured the explosion of the space shuttle Challenger, drew millions. Okay,
it became a world event.
Absolutely. Yeah. That changed CNN and a perception of CNN. Okay, absolutely. And secondly, when the Gulf War broke out, and CNN came into the homes in the Middle East, into South Asia, everywhere, that changed the media landscape. So I referred to that as 2.0. Yeah. Okay, because it changed. You had, communications and satellites and all of these also improved with it. And then we now live in the world of streaming. Yeah. Netflix to Amazon to Apple to, Microsoft maybe someday as well.
Yes.
And that is why I call this era TV 3.0.
Very fitting, very fitting. So what made you condense all these experiences And what made you sit up and say, I need to write a book recording all of these memories, all
Very
of these
simple.
experiences?
When I started off,
Yeah.
I searched the world over in libraries, especially in universities which had media, good quality media studies,
Yes.
because these universities are good places to look for as far as books are concerned.
Absolutely.
And I couldn't find a book, in fact, even now, which dealt with all aspects of a television station.
Yep.
Okay, so I had to learn everything from various sources. And then, thinking about this 3 years ago, I started to sketch this, that look, why can't I transfer my knowledge to people like me, or students, mass communications, journalists, whatever, and for existing people in the media, and for the general public at large. Everything that you need to know if you want to establish a TV station. And this is what it's all about.
But, we are in an age where technology has definitely it has changed the scene, the way in which news is consumed, it's delivered, and obviously everything has changed in the digital era. Technology has become smarter, people are opening up TV stations left, right and center, the market is shrinking. Now, as a traditional broadcaster in the digital age, how are you reinventing yourself? How are you planning to stand out amidst all this noise?
Okay. I think you need to break it down into, for example, into niches like entertainment.
Yes.
Has been impacted.
Yes.
Because your expenses of hiring good actors and producers has gone up.
Yes, absolutely.
Post Netflix. Your sports has not been as much because it's still niche.
Yeah.
It still attracts audiences, except the delivery, and you're looking at 3D and you're looking at on HD platforms, and soon you'll have super HD platforms. So that's not. As far as I've established quite a few business channels, so that's niche again. Yes. But again, business channels are being impacted. There are these two young boys who just opened up in front of NASDAQ and started broadcasting.
Yes.
Okay, and now they've grown. But they've grown and they've taken somebody else and who is a known face, and so it's growing. And that's digital.
That's digital.
That's what CNBC has got to take cognizance of. Oh. And probably the easiest thing is to buy them off.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay. So that's what that's what traditional TVs will look at digital platforms, because these digital platforms present a big threat to traditional media, given the demographics are changing, and people are just not going to come and watch the news anymore.
Yeah, you mentioned the demographics. That's a very valid word. It's the operative word in Africa these days, because we have such a big youth dividend. We have a very big. It's Africa's the youngest continent in the world. What kind of target market are you looking at for CNBC Africa going forward in the digital age?
Look, anything, I won't talk, I think maybe I'll talk about Generation Z.
Sure. It's the millennials,
No, beyond the millennials.
Beyond the millennials. And now we have the Generation Alpha as well.
Alpha is about to come. Okay, so Generation Z are people, there are 2 billion of them. And they were born sort of if I get it right, mid-90s to 2012. Okay. These millennials, these Generation Z, have foregone the PC for a PC in their pocket by way of a smartphone.
Sure.
This smartphone that we have, has more computing power than all that NASA had when it launched the first astronauts on the moon. So, and then they feel, and quite rightly, that look, traditional media, traditional TV, it doesn't deal with the issues that we have or with our lives.
Yeah.
So I think we need to look around and say that how we can capture this. And there is only one answer, and that is mobile, and that is digital, full stop.
I must go back to a point that we touched on earlier. I mean, the traditional media, we were typically known as the gatekeepers of information. It was very important to sieve content and we don't have that happening a lot in the digital age. But how do you see, is that troubling in a way for you? I mean, how do you interpret that?
I think the genie is out of the bottle. Okay, I mean, you had these gatekeepers. You always had these sort of people who had these conspiracy theories of various forms.
Yes.
But you know, if you look at fake news today, yes, quite frankly, and you know, we all know that people actually are trusting what they believe
yes,
they get.
Yeah.
And it's a source of worry. I have written in my book that maybe at some stage you will need an international regulatory authority
that is the point,
to take care of this. Now, you know, let's take the United States. You know, there are people there who still believe that Obama was born outside the United States.
Yes.
Okay. So there's this birther scandal or birther fake news, which and it was used by the existing president. So I think it's a source of worry. I think we need to have this discussed at the international forums, and you cannot get rid of it. I don't think you can get rid of it, but at least you can have, you know, the Instas, the Facebooks, the Vines, and all of these kind of things focused on these things, so that to take them out or to filter them in some way.
So in a sense, traditional media still has a responsibility of making sure that it's the right, accurate news, and it's all about, in the end, good old-fashioned storytelling that is trustworthy.
Absolutely, you're right. Absolutely right. And it's like, you know, the content, which will always be king. But the main thing is that you've got to be credible, you've got to be trustworthy, and in the long term, that'll pay for your success or failure if you're not. People recognize, and people, even nowadays, for big events, people come back to your traditional media.
Absolutely, I agree.
So there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be learned, and it's not only Z, but wait for A.
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome back to the CNBC Africa special. I'm sitting with Zafar Siddiqi, the author of the book TV News 3.0, and we're going to talk about the future of television in Africa. So Zafar, thank you again for being on the show. I just want you to look into the crystal ball, and you do mention the crystal ball in your book as well. What is the future of CNBC Africa? But more importantly, where do you see all of this going in the future? Will it all merge? We all talk about print going out of fashion and dying, but what is going to happen to television in the long term?
Well, if you ask for my personal opinion, I don't think traditional media or traditional television as we know it, it may change, you know, I mean, there may be more, it may be more interactive.
Yes.
They may be using more artificial intelligence in terms of, you know, you had the first robotic presenter in China recently. And it's like you just mentioned, you know, change, you have to adapt. You mentioned the print.
Yes.
The print industry thought they were far too big to falter and ignored the internet.
Yes.
And now they're rebranding themselves, so coming together as on the digital. Yes. And some of them have been successful in their subscription-based models.
Right.
You had, to bring context to it, you had the large US car manufacturer who simply ignored the smaller cars. Okay.
And then see what happened.
Yeah. You had Kodak, which ignored digital film. So, you know, all of these examples are there, and I think that traditional TV will have to adapt. I mean, some of the big guys will probably see which are the smarter digital coming up, and they'll buy them out. Because they'll open their checkbooks.
Yes.
There's no question on that.
Sure.
Some of them, you know, you have this new concept. Let me give you one example. Okay. The Washington Post, for example, when it was bought by Mr. Bezos, he asked the CEO whether they could. Amazon has fantastic, technology at its beck and call.
Yeah.
So initially they put one or two people, the journalists, in the newsroom.
Right.
They were totally ignored. Okay. So, and then what they did was print one or two in the digital format, the reporters, and they started getting feedback on that. And then they started to take notice. So the IT guys further came in, and then so it was a merger of their digital and their print platform. And today, their digital earns
much more,
keeps the print.
Yes, I think that's where we all headed in the long term. But how has technology managed to lower costs and do away with the barriers of entry for a lot of people?
Oh,
you mentioned a lot of young people.
You can start with a $500. You can start to put a even with an iPhone, not even an iPhone. You can use a small.
And with the citizen journalism that we have, and so anybody can.
You see, that's why these young people. I mean, they don't have to wait to see the news.
Yes.
They produce it themselves.
Disseminate it themselves.
And it's all over. And that's why you see these video clips all over.
Yeah. So you mentioned young people, the Generation Z.
Yes.
Who are the target readers for your book?
Oh, I think certainly people in the media industry, journalists, young people who want to maybe start on a digital TV channel or on a traditional TV channel.
Yes.
And the general public at large who want to know a little bit about television.
That's fantastic. There was another snippet in your book that I really picked up on, and that was the fact that in the early days, you loved the film The Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you had actually been to the premieres of all the Indiana Jones movies in London, so meeting Harrison Ford and all of that. Can you just tell us a little bit, a slightly anecdotal take on those early years?
No, it was a very simple thing. Me and my wife were in Buffalo, and we wanted to see Niagara Falls, and it was raining that day, and so they took us to see this film with somebody with a whip in his hand. And I came out of that cinema house, watched the film. It was called Raiders of the Lost Ark. I said, look, you don't really have to know English to know this film. It will be a tremendous success in Pakistan and India and all these places. So I bought the rights, but the rights weren't available, so we had to go through a special consultancy clause that only Steven Spielberg could invoke, which he did invoke, and that film made, history.
That's a great bit of, that was a very interesting snippet and chapter. Now, just going back to your early years, what were the learnings? I mean, you started news channels in Pakistan, in the Middle East, and in Africa. I'm sure each region must have given you something specific. So what were the learnings from those early years, and in these regions specifically?
I think most of these regions, typically, because, 30, 40 years is not a long time in historical terms.
Yes.
So when these governments opened up, because you had state televisions as late as 2000, dominating. India, Southeast Asia, South Asia, Middle East and Africa. And then suddenly you had these private news channels coming in. But, there's still a little bit of control. I'm not saying which area or which regions, but in most, okay? The tolerance, as far as politicians and government is concerned, has its limits. So one has to be careful. But I think the other important aspect is, I went into media as far as universities are concerned. Okay, I went there and opened the universities for a specific purpose. Because when I opened, and in most of the regions I saw, in fact, including Africa, you had this huge, when television came in, private television that is, you had this exodus from print into television without the requisite knowledge
and the skill sets,
that is required. And hence you had sensationalism creeping in.
Yellow journalism.
That's a different aspect altogether. But, sensationalism just to get ratings. Yes. I mean, it's a issue everywhere in the world, ratings, even yes. in US and, But there is experience and skill set, as you put it, and that will come in the next 15, 20, 30 years. And, things will settle down to a more, what I call a robust exchange, because they will be the fourth estate. They are the fourth estate, and they will be, in the proper sense in the future.
And your own personal journey, Zafar, I mean, how have you managed to do so much? I mean, how do you keep up with what is happening around you in all these continents?
No, I think it's best left to good partners
yes.
who look after.
Yeah.
And of course, in some of the TV channels and institutions that I have, businesses, I leave it to the professionals.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, even Steve Jobs or for that matter, I've mentioned this, the immigrant who came in and he was the richest man in America, okay? And on his grave, you can still read, "I became rich because I hired the right people who were smarter than me." Who were smarter than me.
Now, I see that in your book. There's a lot of important quotes from people. Very interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I must go to the last chapter in which you actually got a clairvoyant, an astrologer, to predict the future of broadcast journalism, the TV industry. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I said, it's very easy to forecast, okay, but it's very difficult to get it right, okay?
Yes.
So you can forecast anything you want, but you won't be around.
Yes.
Oh, God. But you've got to be sensible about what these things. And so I said, okay, let me see what these astrologers or futurologists. In fact, I asked a futurologist, but she didn't have the time. Okay. She thought, this is not going to make me much money, 3 or 4 questions. But I did go to this level. In fact, I went to 3, one in Asia, one in Africa, and one in Britain.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Unfortunately, the one from South Africa was not, he could not understand what I was trying to. I just put 4 questions, and those 4 questions are contained in my book, and I even gave Claire's the answers to that. So, some of them are very thought-provoking.
Yeah.
Some of them are very thought-provoking because, in which she talks about somebody taking over the whole world through media, and you can imagine that if a person is rich enough to forget the media part, to take every AI company in the world, okay, and then he, through robotics, controls the entire world.
Just imagine.
And he may be doing it for good intentions. However, somebody may come up and take over from him who has bad intentions, and hence, but she comes out with this, and she said, but, good versus evil. And all that stuff. It is a scary
prospect, the unknown.
I mean, but I thought it was a good perspective to get in and put.
Yeah, I thought it was very original, to be honest. And then you also mentioned something about virtual reality, immersive technology, where if there's a war report on TV, you actually take the viewer to the war zone. Is that going to happen?
It's already happening, but I mean, in a
physical
you have
sense.
To wear. You have to wear, and it's done by about. I think it takes about 64 cameras. It's very expensive to produce.
Wow.
I've seen it. It's 64 cameras, all directions, and to edit that.
Yeah.
And then if you're going live, at the moment they're doing it in edit formats, okay? And that even takes a long time. But there'll be enough computing power, there'll be enough inventions, there'll be enough AI to take care of all this stuff where you can be there.
Wow, that's very interesting. Now, to summarize your book in one line, what is the one piece of advice, the one piece of wisdom that you would like to convey to your prospective readers?
Read the book and get famous by opening a channel, is what I can say.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Zafar. I'm afraid that's all we have time for on this edition of CNBC Africa Special. I was talking to Zafar Siddiqi, the entrepreneur, media investor, and author of the book TV News 3.0. It's a fascinating book. It's a step-by-step insider's guide to launching a news channel in the digital age. Please grab a copy. This is me, Renuka Mithil, signing off in Johannesburg. Goodbye.